This is Algebra 1, Semester 2. It's the 5th unit called Equations Review, and it's the 3rd lesson called Properties of Math. And it's on creatormath.com under the Algebra tab. And it is, sometimes when you Google creatormath.com, you have to type in creatormath.weebly.com into Google to find the site. The instructions are copy the following problems into your composition book on the correct pages according to the table of contents with the notes for those pages from Creator Math. So let's show that really quickly. Let's go here, here, here. Okay, maybe not. Here, there we go. So creatormath.weebly.com, that's the website. Here is what the home page looks like. Remember, all of your composition book stuff is under this. Just find the big words that say composition book and the picture and follow the directions under it. We're going to go to Algebra 1 because we want notes, videos, and practice sets. Here is the vocabulary PDF that has all the answers to all the vocabulary for the entire year. You're going to want to know where that is. Pass by that. Let's look at Semester 2. This entire table of contents should be copied onto your pages 2 through 6 of your comp book by now. If you haven't done it already, stop what you're doing right now and copy every line onto pages 2 through 6. It'll take about 3.5 pages and about 40 minutes to do. All right, but once you got it, you're going to know where everything goes, page by page. So let's go down to Equations Review. That's the unit. Let's go to the second lesson called Operations and Their Opposites. Take that back. Let's go to the third lesson. Here we go. Which says Properties of Math. It goes on pages 127 to 128, but please check the actual table of contents by then because by the time you see this video, this is already going to be changed. So we're going to click Notes. That is what goes on these pages. Oftentimes I have to load it twice. This time I didn't. Let's look at what we got here. And we might use this through these problems because math properties are ones where students always forget them, even though they use them all the time and know them. Properties of math. Commutative property of addition. If we have on one side 2 plus 3, we can say 3 plus 2. And that's why you can reverse addition terms, and then you're going to get the same answer. It's called the commutative property of addition. We have another one called, can I see it? The commutative property of multiplication is the same thing, but using multiplication, you can also reverse those. The associative property of addition is where we can group different values. As long as they're being added, it's going to be equal. The associative property of multiplication, we can group different values. As long as they're being multiplied, they're going to be equal. The distributive property is where we take the term outside the parentheses, multiply it by each term inside the parentheses, and list them separately there divided by the sign involved. This one uses two sets where we use a FOIL process or a two-step distributive process. The additive identity is if you add something to this number and we have the same number, that's the additive identity. It's adding 0. The additive inverse is where you add something to this number to get 0, and that's where you add the opposite in terms of sign. So if you have a positive 5, you have a negative 5. You have a negative 5, you add the positive 5. You're going to go back to 0. All right, what else we got? Two more. The identity property, it's the multiplicative identity property, which is 8 times 1 equals 8. It's multiplying anything times 1 does not change its value. The multiplicative inverse is where we multiply a number by its reciprocal. A reciprocal is flipping it so that it's now in the opposite position of the fraction. So if you take 1/8 and you multiply it by 1/8, which is the reciprocal of 8, you get 8/8 or 1. And it's called the multiplicative inverse property. So what do we got here? Parentheses, inverse, and that's about it. Copy those in. Let's see if we go back to them through these. Let's see how difficult this is, right? Properties of math can be made very difficult, but in this case we probably kept them simple. The commutative property of addition. So it's just where we have, you know, the left side added and the switched terms on the right, and we show that they're equal, which 2 plus 3 is 5 and 3 plus 2 is 5. This is it here. And it says A plus B equals B plus A. The order of terms can be switched, and the result is unchanged. Okay? This is 2 plus 3 equals 3 plus 2. Order of operations. Oh, now they're giving us this sample, and they're saying, which is it? It's the commutative property of addition. All right? And look, they kept the options simple, so all we have to see is it's not multiplication, and we got it. I appreciate that. The commutative property of multiplication is 2 times 3 equals 3 times 2. We can switch the order of the terms, and the result is unchanged. Something tells me they're going to do the same thing. They're going to give me this, and it is the commutative property of multiplication right here. The associative property of addition is where we group different items. As long as they're all being added, we're going to get the same thing here. So the grouping of terms can be switched, and the result is unchanged. In other words, 8 plus 5 is 13, plus 1 is 14. 1 plus 8 is 9, plus 5 is 14. 14 is equal to 14. Something tells me they're now going to give us this, and we're going to have to say it is the associative property of addition. All right. Go back and check the notes if you need to, but they've made this sort of almost a practice that can help us learn it, I would say. The associative property of multiplication. So now we're grouping in a multiplied set of terms. If we group the 3 and the 4 and multiply them first, so that's 12 times 2 is 24. But what if we group the 2 and the 3? That would be 6 times 4 is 24. It's just proof that we can move those terms around as long as they're all being multiplied, and the end result will be unchanged. Something tells me they're going to give us a sample of this now, and we're going to say the associative property of multiplication. That's its name. All right, let's do distributive property. Distributive takes the outside term, multiplies it by the inside terms, and so that becomes AB plus AC, and they don't really describe it, all right? But that's what distributive is right there. It's not this, and it's not this. Those are not distributive. Now they're giving us distributive and asking us to name it, distributive property. All right. So the additive identity property is if we add something to this 5 and it still remains 5, 5 plus 0 equals 0 plus 5. Yep, adding 0 to any number does not change the number. Now they're going to give us one, and we're going to say the additive identity property. So the additive inverse property is where we can add something and it goes to 0. So if we have 5 and add its opposite in terms of sign, we go back to 0. That's what that is. And now I believe they're going to give us this and ask us to say it's the additive inverse property. The multiplicative identity is where you multiply by 1. Anything can be multiplied by 1. It's not going to change its value. If you take $1 and multiply it by 1, you still only got $1. If you take a human and multiply it by 1, you still have the same human. All right, so multiplying by 1 does not change the value. Here they're giving it to us again, and we're saying the multiplicative identity property. The multiplicative inverse is where we multiply by its reciprocal. 8 times an 8 equals 1. And if you had 1/8 and you multiplied it by 8, it would equal 1. Right? So here we go, 8 times an 8, the multiplicative inverse. So just practice on the properties of math, but they're being very gentle with us. They're not making it challenging. Even the problem set looks like it's geared to help us, remember what these are and understand them. So I appreciate that. This is match up the title correctly. This is Algebra 1, Semester 2. It's the 5th unit on equations review. So we've done equations before last semester. And this is the 3rd lesson called Properties of Math Practice. It's on creatormath.com under the Algebra 1 tab. Hope that helps.